You know the name Doug Poppa?
Yes, I do. God bless Doug Poppa, an honest cop.
I was elated, of course, but then as he testified, I was somewhat concerned for him because I knew that they were probably going to crucify that man.
The top cop who put his badge on the line for justice.
One man who confronted truth and consequences.
Welcome to Truth and Consequences with Doug Poppa, episode 53 for Sunday, June 6th, 2021. Truth, oath, honor, and integrity. Simple but powerful words. The definitions that mold the character of an honest cop. Corruption, deception, misconduct, and cover-ups. Those words we should never hear when speaking of law enforcement. However, oftentimes they are synonymous with police and the criminal justice system. Almost 30 years ago, my law enforcement career came to a screeching halt because I believed in the oath I swore to when I became a cop. Sometimes doing what is right and telling the truth has consequences. How can doing what is right end up so wrong? I would tell myself many times over the past decades. As I get older in life, I face the prospect of my own mortality, and lately often look back at my life. Police work was a major part of my life, and I did it with passion and pride. I was one of the good guys, I would tell myself. I believed in the oath I took when I became a cop. Honor and integrity should be rewarded, not frowned upon, I would tell myself many times over the past decades. And if you are or were in law enforcement, you know that there are cops who seem to get away with just about anything because they are close to the brass or have a connection, while others are disciplined and or retaliated against. And don't ever think about going up against the system and standing up for what is right, something you swore an oath to do. Telling the truth is sometimes a death sentence to your law enforcement career. At least it was in my case. Hanging a cop out to dry because somebody less honorable has to protect their own ass has occurred all too often in the past and way too many times in the present, and that is a disgrace in police work and the criminal justice system. I found out the hard way that not everyone who wears a badge is a good guy. Not all cops are honorable, and that goes for prosecutors also. In my case, when it came time to stand tall and do what was right, I was abandoned by not only my department, but the criminal justice system itself to some extent. Good morals and ethics are inherent in good people. Pinning on a badge doesn't miraculously make you a better person. If you lack good character traits and you become a cop, you will end up being a bad cop. And speaking of honor, honor is something that comes from the heart. Good cops don't stand by and let a good cop get screwed. Good cops don't let bad cops get away with corruption and misconduct and disgrace the badge. Maybe I should rephrase that. Because in reality, yes, they do. In police work, integrity and honor many times takes a back seat to cowardice and complicity. Cops are hypocrites. Not all cops, but many. Why? Because cops want criminals to inform on other criminals. That's how cases are made. That's how you move up the ladder in a criminal investigation. But God forbid that a cop informs on a bad cop or stands up for the oath he swore to. Then he's a piece of trash, a rat, because he broke that blue wall of silence. I guess these cops think that wearing a badge gives them some God-given right to break the law and or violate someone's rights and act as judge, jury, and executioner. What they do is spit on and tarnish the badge of every good cop and every cop who has given up their life on the job. To this day, I just don't understand why cops stand by and let these thugs with a badge get away with this kind of behavior. What bad cops don't seem to understand is that once they break the law, they have gone from being a cop to being a criminal. And that goes for prosecutors also. It doesn't make a damn difference if the titles before their names are district attorney, Commonwealth's attorney, or attorney general. When it comes down to protecting their own ass, they lie, cheat, and do whatever they have to just to protect themselves and the image of their departments, and that is usually at the expense of another cop or a civilian. I learned the hard way that the strong arm of the law has a long reach, and sometimes that reach is deceitful and malicious. When I was being methodically crushed by the same system I gave my life to, it was devastating. When they could find nothing else to attack me with, they did what any coward would do. They made up lies and defamed my character and integrity many times, and often behind my back. They embarked on a campaign of character assassination, making comments to the press off the record because they were not man enough to say it outright. I guess they thought that if they spread enough lies about me, it would work to their benefit. How so wrong they were. The truth does have a funny way of creeping out, and in my case, in 1992, it not only creeped out, it poured out. The following is an op-ed that I wrote that was published by the Loudoun Times-Mirror in Leesburg, Virginia, on June 11, 1992, that was titled, "Our Criminal Justice System Isn't Working." I will have some closing comments after I read it. I have always believed in our criminal justice system. I know it's not a perfect system, but it has worked pretty well for more than 200 years. You can be sure that if I didn't believe in our system, I wouldn't have dedicated almost 18 years, half my life, to law enforcement. I always thought that most cops think we're right and they're wrong. I certainly did. I believe that because law enforcement is on the side of right. The system must be right, and it must be right all the time. Sadly, the events of the last few months have shattered my professional and my personal life and made me question my faith in the system, at least as it works in the Loudoun County Sheriff's Office. On November 20th, 1991, I testified at the habeas corpus hearing in the William Douglas Carter case. One portion of my testimony related how I gave Captain Vernon Beamer evidence before the trial that tended to show Carter was innocent. Another portion of my testimony related how I gave the same information before the trial to Commonwealth's Attorney William Birch. It is clear now that neither Birch or Beamer ever passed the information on to the defense. Within days of my testimony at that hearing, my professional reputation was questioned. 12 years with the sheriff's office, more than half of which was as a narcotics investigator with a good reputation, did not mean a damn thing. I did what was expected of any cop. I told the truth. But when I went to Sheriff Isom and asked him if he would back me up for telling the truth, his response was that this had nothing to do with the sheriff's office. He said this was a matter between the Commonwealth's attorney and myself. This shocked me. I told Sheriff Isom that I worked for him as an investigator and that Vernon Beamer was one of his captains. I asked, didn't that make it a department problem? His answer was no. Shortly thereafter, Commonwealth's Attorney Birch and his deputy, James Forsyth, began to attack my credibility. Although I had testified in Loudoun courts for years, now, suddenly, when it suited their purposes, I was deemed untrustworthy. They slandered me in the local papers. When I went back and asked Sheriff Isom again to back me up, he attacked me instead. I became the target of harassment by Sheriff Isom and Lieutenant Jeff Brown because I did the unthinkable. I had defended my reputation, uncovered misconduct in the bargain, and did so by talking to the local media. I had the nerve to exercise my First Amendment rights. Sheriff Isom and his designated hitters bombarded me with threats of transfer, so I would be out of the public eye until this blows over. But we were in law enforcement. Law enforcement doesn't wait for things to blow over. It investigates and uncovers the truth while the trail is hot, or at least warm. Sheriff Isom preferred, however, to wait until apathy obscured the truth, rather than immediately initiate an internal affairs investigation of what happened in the Carter case. Either I had perjured myself while under oath, or I was telling the truth. If I was telling the truth, both Commonwealth's Attorney Birch and Captain Beamer withheld material evidence. The right thing for the sheriff to do was to initiate an investigation to determine who was telling the truth, particularly to consider whether an innocent man was sitting in a jail cell. But this never happened. Because of my testimony at the first hearing, a second hearing was scheduled for January 8, 1992. I told Sheriff Isom I had witnesses who remembered that I had discussed Mrs. Carter's confessions about suicide and framing her husband back in 1987 when she wanted to hire me as a bodyguard. But even that didn't jumpstart the sheriff into questioning them. When I heard that the Virginia State Police, at the request of the Attorney General's office, would interview people before the January 8th hearing, I thought, wow, now the truth will come out. But I was wrong again. Neither local nor state investigators had any interest in getting to the truth. The state's agents did not talk to any of the witnesses I identified, even after I had told them that they had pertinent information. Luckily, the private investigator working for Mr. Carter did. He found they had pertinent information and subpoenaed them to court to testify. It was a shock for Bob Condon, the Assistant Attorney General handling the case, when these witnesses appeared and confirmed what I said. It was not until after the January 8th hearing that I was informed it had been the job of the Attorney General's office to defend the Department of Corrections and to discredit me if it could. Obviously, I missed something in my law enforcement experience. As I said at the outset, I thought the job of the criminal justice system was to try to find the truth, not to conceal it. Several weeks later, Judge Sinclair found my testimony credible, ordered Mr. Carter released, and awarded him a new trial based on my testimony and the testimony of other witnesses corroborating my recollection. The matter was over, and things should have settled down, so I thought. But I was wrong once again. There was still worse to come for me. I was transferred out of narcotics investigations to serve civil process. Then I was suspended, and finally I was fired by Sheriff Isom. Even as I was being discharged for failing to take a polygraph, although I did agree to take one, the sheriff was not truthful about the reason for firing me. He claimed some TV film crew that took pictures of me exposed the county to liability. He said this more than 2 weeks after a departmental investigation concluded the opposite. I was investigated for defending my reputation and for telling this community in court and in print how law enforcement was being compromised. Yet, Captain Beamer and Commonwealth Attorney Birch, who subverted their oaths to uphold the law and instead violated their obligation, were immune from criticism, much less discipline. I'm not a cop today because I told the truth. That sounds like something I read by Kafka a long time ago. I have asked myself repeatedly if it was all worth it. If I had to do it all over again, I asked myself, would I do the same thing? My answer is simple: yes. When a cop does not have to tell the truth and may even lie or even remain silent to keep his job, individual freedom and liberty are at risk. I believe this community wants its law enforcement officers to tell the truth. But right now, shameful misconduct is being tolerated not just by the sheriff and by the Commonwealth Attorney, but also by our Board of Supervisors and by our other elected officials. Our various elected officials remain mute, approving this law enforcement charade by their silence and by their failure to act. This silence, this official apathy, is as wrong as it would have been if I had lied or remained silent to keep my job. Although, under the circumstances, had I lied or remained silent, I would have been retained. Thus have I found justice as defined by the sheriff and the Commonwealth Attorney to be a fickle mistress, not just blind, but deaf and dumb as well. Still, I have no regrets about what I did. I could not do otherwise. I also believe that only by doing what was right, even at great personal cost, have I been able to enforce the resolve of those like-minded individuals in this community, and yes, in the sheriff's office, who believe their mission is to uncover the truth and tell it as best they can. I was told when I told the truth by a sergeant back in November that they were going to get me. He was right. They did. But I can't believe this community will suffer in silence when it realizes what's at stake. And now my closing comments. The retrial of William Douglas Carter occurred in the summer of 1992. I, along with other witnesses, testified. Mr. Carter was found not guilty of the attempted murder of his former wife. With me, it had nothing to do as to whether Carter may have been innocent or guilty of the crime when I came forward. The fact was established that exculpatory evidence was withheld from his defense during his 1988 trial that I had disclosed to the prosecutor's office and the sheriff's office in 1987 prior to Mr. Carter's trial. The criminal justice system did work for Mr. Carter, albeit far too late, though. I guess the citizens of Loudoun County finally had enough, because in 1995, Loudoun County Sheriff John Isom, along with Commonwealth's Attorney William Birch, lost their bid for re-election. From what I was told, nothing ever happened to Captain Vernon Beamer, who also withheld exculpatory evidence. I myself would never work in law enforcement ever again. I tried many times over the years to no avail. So in my case, the system did let me down. Back in 1992, when everything was going bad for me, something happened that was so positive, it made me, for a short while anyway, feel really good inside. I was leaving the supermarket one day, and I hear somebody call my name. Not recognizing the guy approaching me, I put my right hand in my coat pocket, because that's where I kept my Walther 380 at the time, just in case. As it turns out, I had arrested him many years before on a drug dealing charge, and he was sentenced to prison. He tells me that I saved his life because going to prison changed him for the better. He tells me that he now has a good job, a wife, and just had a new baby. Then he shakes my hand, says thank you, and then said he had been reading the papers and watching the news and had seen everything I was going through. He says to me, "Doug, you're a good cop, and I feel so bad for you. I hope everything works out for you." Can you imagine that? To this day, I have never forgotten that. A few years ago, I received a telephone call out of the blue from a retired ranking member of the sheriff's office. He had nothing to do with anything that was going on with me back then, just one of the cops who decided it was better to avoid me at the time. He said that he was sorry for the way he treated me and that he should have stood by me at a time when I needed support. I told him I had no animosity towards him and thanked him for what he said. It takes a mighty big man to do what he did after all this time. People would ask me over the years why I did what I did, and did I regret it because of the way things turned out for me. My answer was the same as I had given the Washington Post reporter who interviewed me after I was fired in 1992. In the article that was titled, "Investigator Dismissed in Loudoun, Deputy's Testimony Led to Carter Retrial," he quoted me as saying, "I have no regrets about what I did," Poppa said. "I did nothing more than any law enforcement officer should do. You take an oath, and the oath says you stand up for the truth." The following video excerpts are from news stories from 1992. Thanks for listening, folks. And by the way, in my next episode, I will expose the Las Vegas Metro Police cover-up.
They deliberately withheld evidence that should have been given to my defense attorneys.
But this November, the court believed Doug Poppa.
Oh my goodness, is this the reception committee?
And on Valentine's Day, William Carter was released on a $50,000 bond and given a new trial.
My goodness.
Carter was convicted of the shooting and served 4 years in prison. A judge ordered him released last February after Loudoun County Sheriff's Deputy Doug Poppa accused Commonwealth's Attorney William Birch of withholding evidence in the first trial.
All the evidence that was hidden from me at the first trial, I don't say all, but a lot of evidence that had been hidden the first time has now been disclosed to us. We've either found it or Judge Culp has ordered that it be turned over to us. So we have a lot of evidence that we didn't have the first time.
He told the Commonwealth's attorney then that Vandergrift had threatened to shoot herself in order to frame her ex-husband.
Tells me, she said, I hate him so much, I would shoot myself even if I died, if I could make it look like he did it, so he would spend the rest of his life in jail and ruin the rest of his life.
Poppa has since been fired from his job as a sheriff's deputy, and the sheriff's office is under investigation by the FBI. Douglas Carter was convicted of shooting his ex-wife in 1987 and served 4 years in jail. He was ordered released from prison last February and given a new trial after a judge determined that Loudoun County Commonwealth's Attorney William Birch and a Sheriff's Department official had improperly withheld Poppa's statement in the first trial. Another defense witness, former Loudoun County Deputy Sheriff Doug Poppa, testified that Vandergrift had told him she might shoot herself in order to get back at her husband.
He stated to me, he says, I hate him so much I would shoot myself even if I died. If I can make it look like he did it, so he would spend the rest of his life in jail and ruin the rest of his life.
Last week, a defense witness, Suzanne Culver-Jones, also accused Birch of telling her before the first trial to avoid talking about the kind of gun Vandergrift told her was used in the shooting. If true, it would constitute prosecutorial misconduct. Birch, who was called as a rebuttal witness this afternoon, denied the allegation.
I don't recall her saying anything about the gun, 38 caliber, anything like that.
In court today, there was testimony favorable to Carter's contention that his ex-wife Carol Vandergrift hated him so much she shot herself and then tried to frame him. A neighbor testified that Carol Vandergrift told her she wanted revenge after the couple's bitter divorce.
I know one time she told me that she would do anything to get back at him. I know she told me that he had a lot of money and that she felt that she deserved more than she was getting out of the divorce. And she was very angry about this.
Carter was convicted of shooting his ex-wife in 1987 and served 4 years in prison. A judge ordered him released last February after determining that Loudoun County Commonwealth's Attorney William Birch and Sheriff's Department officials had withheld evidence in the first trial. That evidence was a statement Carol Vandergrift allegedly made to former Sheriff's Deputy Doug Poppa, saying she would go as far as to shoot herself and blame her husband in order to ruin him.
Well, no, she acted rude all the time. I didn't really pay too much attention to her.
A former employee on the Carter's Middleburg farm testified that Carol Vandergrift seemed unstable.
I get the impression you don't like Mrs. Carter.
Yes, I like Mrs. Carter. I like Mr. Carter. I like both of them. I have nothing against either one of them.
But didn't you tell counsel that you thought she was weird?
She is.
Tonight, free after his acquittal today on charges of shooting his ex-wife. It was the second trial for the former Middleburg millionaire. After serving more than 4 years behind bars, Carter was on the edge of his seat when the verdict was read today. Jen Fox has our report.
We, the jury, on the issues joined, find the defendant, William Douglas Carter, not guilty. Wendy R.
After he audibly thanked the jury, Douglas Carter could not contain himself. The tears flowed.
I came out and testified in November of 1991 at the habeas corpus hearing, and again in January. I was suspended for 10 days without pay, and I ended up being fired after 12 years in this department. Okay? I'm mad, and I'm angry, and I'm going to be in Loudoun County. I'm going to be a thorn in their side until William Birch and John Eisen are thrown the hell out of office.